Welcome to Framework Leadership, a podcast about principles and ideas that you can use absolutely today to take your leadership to the next level. Exclusively now part of the SCU Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kent Ingle, president of Southeastern University, and I'm excited to introduce our co-host for today's show, Nick Wallsteadt. Nick serves as our VP for Unrestricted Education, and so grateful that you had time today. Stop by and be a part of this show, Nick.
Thanks, Kent. Thanks for having me on. Excited for the conversation.
How's life been in the pandemic world these days?
Yeah, I think 2020 has just been a great year overall. It's been good. I got, as we were in lockdown mode for about 90 days, I was walking a ton, just doing laps around the neighborhood, trying to stay active. So it's been okay, trying to focus on the good.
Yeah, and I know you're in CrossFit. In fact, you do competitions in CrossFit, right?
I've done a few. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not nationally competitive or anything. This is how I stay active. Try to keep up around here at SCU.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's all about discipline, right?
that's right.
In fact, is the gym open? It's open now for you. CrossFit gym's open, right?
Yeah, our gyms are open, and you don't have to wear a mask necessarily. Most of the workouts are outdoor, stuff like that. So it's been good.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to have a conversation about restructuring for growth and sustainability. When we talk about growth and sustainability, we're really talking about the essence of what a true healthy organization is all about. And you have to have both. You can't, there's a lot of, organizations that grow, but they're not healthy because they can't grow their systems, or there's no sustainability there. And as an organization grows, there must be the systems in place that allow that growth to really be long-term. Sustainable long-term health is always the priority over short-term growth. In our context here at SCU, growth and sustainability has always they've come out of our framing process. And in fact, as you know, every single decision our leadership team makes must go through that framing process, and that has four unique steps. It's listening, it's auditing, it's clarifying, and then it's aligning everything to put us on that pathway to growth and sustainability. Our unrestricted education model was birthed out of this framing process. It was birthed out of the process because we were looking at the issues in higher ed specifically when it comes to having unique access to educational models, delivery, also looking at affordability, and then having experiential education. And Nick, I know you've been a vital piece in the success of UE over the years. You've led this particular college. There has been tremendous growth with our extension sites. This past academic season, we had 150, and we're about to add this fall to that about
30 or 40 more.
30 or 40 more. Yeah. So, very successful. So what have you learned about change over, the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, Ken, I think you nailed it. A systematic approach is absolutely one of the keys. I think one of the distinctives about SCU is an intentional listening posture. And I think you've modeled that. I think that the organization, the institution, really works hard to cultivate listening opportunities at a lot of levels with students, with staff, faculty, partnerships, many levels. So I think it's interesting that when it comes to change, when we start off with this posture of listening, it helps frame the necessity for change. We know it. We work in higher education day in and day out, and higher ed is long overdue, in fact, probably for broad change, for big change. And I think that's something that SCU sensed several years ago. So intentionally listening really helps us as an institution and helps our department. But really even broader than that, helps the industry of higher ed understand, hey, why can't we stay here? Why do we need to change? When we listen, we understand some of those factors. Right. So,
yeah, absolutely. A big question that we have had to ask ourselves, I think, in all of it is, how do you know when it's time to restructure and change? If you've ever heard of the S curve, the sigmoid curve, we talk about it a lot here, the curve of an organization, how they start out, how they grow, when they plateau, when they start declining, those kinds of things. It's a common tool. The S curve is used to track and talk a lot about the natural life cycle of an organization. And it really is a mathematical concept that is used to show the growth, the plateau, the decline of an organization's performance over a period of time. The secret to beating the curve, though, is innovation, and pushing that innovation before you begin to reach plateau status. And so oftentimes you're pushing innovation in an organization when people may think, well, why do we need to innovate? Because everything's going well. My goodness, record growth. Everything seems to be in the system's working, and so a lot of people think, why do we need to change then? But oftentimes that's when innovation really needs to step in, and that's really the secret to beating the curve. And before your previous curve begins to plateau and decline, you've got to innovate in a way or in a system that pushes your organization to something brand new, something fresh.
Right.
And so, Nick, in your experience, what have you done to push the boundaries of innovation, even when it seems things, especially in UE, are progressing so well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's a tough one, maybe to always know the right answer to at the right time. I think that's where it really helps to have institutional buy-in, kind of committed to like you said, we're committed as a university to this growth, to this innovation. So, I think that as we've seen this meteoric, kind of the exponential growth phase for at least our department, but really for the whole university, has really been the last 3-4 years. I think in that process, something interesting is I've noticed this pull, this kind of drift towards predictability, that at every level, there's this question lurking out there, almost like a temptation. It'd just be so nice if things would be predictable, they'd be easy to manage, we could steward this growth in a really predictable way, even at a predictable pace. And the reality, though, I think that we've discovered is, that's not where education is. It's not where students are at.
Right.
That's not where our partnerships are at. So, to your question, we've tried to embrace kind of two phrases we say on our team. We have a few cultural mindsets. Two things we say are we have a tolerance for ambiguity and we embrace the frontier.
Yep.
And it's really a way to communicate, I think, for us that, hey, we're if you don't like those things, you're probably going to find yourself frustrated because there's going to be this constant innovation. Just when you think things are going to become predictable or there's a desire for predictability, it may be time to change. And even at an individual level, someone on a team may not know why, but from a broader standpoint, well, it's like we have to keep innovating, like you said. So, and I know that's something that's part of your leadership rhythm, Ken. It'd be interesting. I think you're an intuitive leader. I think you often sense and kind of discern what's happening, maybe even before everybody else notices. What are some of the markers that maybe you look for?
Well, I think first and foremost, discernment is actually very important in my life, and discernment grows out of being disciplined in the process, in the framing process for me. And it comes mostly for me out of listening and taking time to get a good ear to the ground as to what are the issues, what are the challenges, what are the celebrations, what are the things that enabled us to move forward in different and new and unique ways. I mean, I remember coming to the university back in 2010, coming into an organization that had a successful decade of growth under the previous president, but the in-between period between the past president and myself, 2 years took place. And in an organization that doesn't have a leader to guide the process of growth or change is going to start that downward spiral.
Right.
And quite honestly, that was what was happening here at SEU when I came on the scene, and a lot of it had to do with enrollment decline. The enrollment over those 2 years had declined over 700 students. Revenue had declined by over 15 million. Wow. I mean, it was, and most institutions like ours, which are enrollment driven and rely on tuition, and we're tuition driven. You have a couple of those cycles, and it can, no matter how healthy you think you are,
Yeah.
it can affect that.
Yeah.
And so in order to know where you need to go, you have to start with that foundational discernment piece of listening. And so I remember we started listening exercises, pretty comprehensive, more so than the norm. And it was pretty fascinating to listen to groups. We use the appreciative inquiry approach, which is more of a positive approach rather than a negative. Instead of saying what's wrong with an organization, what's right with an organization, what are strengths, things like that. And in order to know where we're going as an organization, I think it always comes down to the potential of the people that are there. So you have to listen. You have to take time. That was what allowed us, I think, to move our organization towards a path of growth and innovation. And then, since we've moved the conversation towards people, I want to hear about your team, because it's all about relationship. It's all about the people that are there. It's all about who they are, their gifts, their skills, their experiences. And I want to hear about your team. You have actually forged, you put together a high performing team in UE. And I look at what you've done. It's been amazing, and you've got a great team. And you've put together people with different talents and passions around a common vision of innovation. So what has made your team so cohesive while also keeping that constant, embrace of change?
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, appreciate that, Kent. I'm a huge fan of our team. I know I'm biased, but I think we do. I think we have an all-star team in UE, and like you identified, we have people from different backgrounds. I think a few things probably go into this. One, a key one for us is we start out focusing on our mission. What's our mission as a university? What's our mission as a department within that university serving students who aren't learning here on a traditional campus? So what's our mission in that? That we try to allow that to be the primary connection point for new team members. And then we even try to continually come back to that focus for everyone on our team at every level. Our hope is that everyone on our team understands their role in fulfilling the university's mission, which is helping students discover and develop their divine design, as well as making education affordable and accessible. So I think a simple way to phrase that is to say, hey, we point to what we're doing, who we're doing it for, and why it matters, and then we try to build culture really around there, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to have this vibrant culture that attracts people. We try to put our mission out in front, and I think what's been interesting about that, like you identified, we really do. We have a high caliber team representing talent from all kinds of different backgrounds. Team members from large format, multi-site local churches, higher education innovators. We have new, freshly minted MBAs who are excited to dig in, and we can focus all that energy and all those different backgrounds and talents around this common purpose, which is not really even about serving the university. It's about serving God's kingdom. It's about serving students. And so we try to keep the mission focused there. I think it's interesting, too. It's one of the things for us. We're just part of this broader institution. And so I've heard you say it here on the podcast. I've heard you say it in your leadership regularly, this phrase, context is key. Context is everything. I think it'd be interesting to hear when it comes to finding new team members for you, what role does context play in kind of finding the right fit?
Yeah, well, I can tell you when I'm thinking, about implementing change, I think about people, as we've talked about, and I think about systems, people and systems. Systems are created by people to really, carry out the ideas and the new curves in an organization. So without systems in place to sustain, operations, the future of an organization, I think often can be put in jeopardy. And in the systems I think that we create, there must be a human presence. And not only a human presence, but there has to be excellence present. There has to be focus in all aspects. There's more to finding, to find, greater levels of efficiency to discover in the systems that we create. And I want to share with you a story, because one of the books that I love, and we talk about it a lot, is the book Good to Great, and I brought it with me for this podcast. But there's a story from this here in this book that I think it really emphasizes the importance of systems and the implementation of systems. But it says this. It says most people think that Sam Walton, who created Walmart, just exploded onto the scene with his visionary ideas for rural discount retailing, hitting breakthrough almost as a startup company, but nothing could be further from the truth, which I thought was fascinating. Sam Walton began in 1945 with a single dime store. He didn't open his second store until 7 years later. Walton built incrementally, step by step, turn by turn, of the flywheel until the hedgehog concept of large discount marts popped out as a natural evolutionary step in the mid-1960s. It took Walton a quarter of a century to grow from that single dime store to a chain of 38 Walmarts. Then from 1970 to 2000, Walmart hit breakthrough momentum and exploded to over 3,000 stores with over 150 billion,
wow.
That's billion, I mean, in revenues. So when you think about that, I mean, and that's just one story that's in that book. So as you reflect, even on that story of Sam Walton and your own leadership, what advice would you give a leader trying to implement a new system into an organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, just like in that story, it seems like systems, I noticed this for people on our team and really people on a lot of teams, the need for a new system, usually the team knows it. It's not some mystery. It's not unknown. I think there's a sense that maybe things aren't working as well as they could be. As in Sam's story, which I wish we all could be Sam Walton.
Right.
But this idea that, hey, through this process, what emerged was their natural niche in the market. And so I think I've noticed that for our team is as you're constantly innovating, I think what we encourage the team regularly to do is bring their highest and best contribution and don't worry about trying to retool the systems all the time. What'll likely occur is that the best system, the need to change things broadly will become obvious to a lot of people. I think that's another key thing for us is especially at a university where there are a lot of different moving parts, working together. There's probably a temptation to create systems that work for your team that might have negatively or might cause disruption in other areas. So I think that's something we encourage our teams to do is say, hey, look, I know this might not be working perfectly, but there's likely going to be a point where the macro system needs an overhaul.
Sure.
And so we can kind of get a pulse on that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, as we move into the fire round, I want us to hit 4 practical application points that our listeners can hopefully take away from this podcast. And I'll start off with the first point. I think before embarking on a journey of growth, make sure, again, you have the systems in place to handle that growth. I know we just finished talking a few minutes ago, but here's an idea. You're not going to start, for example, a road trip if you don't have a vehicle that is capable of going across the country. I mean, that's just common sense. And even then, you have to have the fuel to make it from point A to point B. So that's extremely important.
Yep, absolutely. I think number 2, natural second point, when you're designing the systems, I think it's so important to make sure you're listening first. If not, you kind of run this risk of you're going to create systems, you're going to answer questions no one's asking, you're going to serve the organization first. In that model, you want to make sure you understand where's the family want to go. We don't want to take them in the wrong direction.
Exactly. I think a third application for creating sustainable growth, you need to have the right people. That's extremely important. If the vehicle is the system, then the fuel is the people. Leaders need to understand that change can be very stressful, and it is essential to have, buy-in from your team. And you need leaders that will be a proponent for the mission of your organization. So make sure, I think what's important is that you have the right people in place. Right people are in the right seats at the right time.
Right, and I think number 4, right off that, the fourth thing would be keep the mission, and this is really a fight, but you got to keep the mission front and center, I think. And like what you described, when you have a lot of talented leaders leading well, mission drift can kind of creep in. So along with these high caliber leaders, if you're continually realigning them towards a shared mission, you just kind of are able to step back, watch what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. I want to thank you for joining me today on the Framework Leadership Podcast. I'm thankful for your insights on restructuring for growth and sustainability. And for all of our listeners, I hope that you leave this conversation with a better understanding of what it takes to get on the road to having a healthy, growing organization, and one that lasts, one that is sustainable. Remember that long-term health trumps short-term growth anytime. Well, we will see you next time on Framework Leadership.